Well, hello everyone, and welcome once again to episode 77 of the Yorkshire Gamers Reet Big Wargames podcast. And today is a bit of a special episode. It is the tribute, or my tribute, to Charlie Wesencraft, one of the trailblazers in our hobby, who sadly passed away earlier in this year at the grand old age of 97. Charlie was famous mostly for a couple of his early books, Practical Wargaming and With Pike and Musket. And I'm going to have a number of people on the show today to talk about Charlie. And they're all people who've been on the show before. And in between the interviews, I am going to put me reading an abstract or an extract from Charlie's book, Practical Wargaming. This is my tribute to Charlie, and I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1, Introduction. My interest in wargaming began with my fourth Christmas. At some unheard hour in the morning, having felt my way through a stocking filled with the usual assortment of sweets, pencils, new pennies, etc., and then having emptied the pillowcase found at the foot of my bed, "Santa's left his sack," a cry that had awakened the household. I was satisfied that I had indeed obtained every toy ever invented. At 8 o'clock, I was taken downstairs for breakfast. The living room door stood open, and there, laid out in all its glory, it awaited me. A fort. The walls were manned by troops in red uniforms. They were being assaulted by a mixed army of cowboys and Indians, a few knights in armour, and some men dressed in brown. Breakfast was forgotten. I had my first battle to fight. But where to begin? I was most fortunate in having a father who knew exactly how to fight battles with lead soldiers. His game had its own simple rules. None of this bang and you're dead, no you missed nonsense. For him, I was to be taught correctly from the start. I was given a number of old pencils and told to choose your side. As you can imagine, I elected to defend the fort and was told to kneel down behind it. My father knelt behind the attacking force, armed with an equal supply of pencils, and on the command of fire, I threw my ammunition, one at a time, at his troops, and he fired back at mine. That was the first bit of Charlie's book, and we're going to now move on and talk to Robbie Roddis, who's been on the show before, and we're going to have a potted history of Charlie Wesencraft's life and hobby. Well, welcome to this episode, and we are celebrating today the life of Charlie Wesencraft, one of the probably forgotten, and we'll talk about this with Robbie, my guest, in a minute. When we compare to Don Featherstone, Peter Gilder, and the likes, Charlie Wesencraft is not regularly mentioned up there, but he was one of the shining lights in the start of the hobby, and I'm really glad that today guest Robbie Roddis, who was on when we spoke about Peter Gilder some time ago, has agreed to come on and be cross-examined about the life of Charlie Wesencraft. So this is your chosen subject in Celebrity Mastermind, Robbie. Are you ready to go, mate?
I am. Thanks very much. How is it? I always seem to talk about former people that are, no longer with us.
I don't know, mate. You've got a name for it, but you're still with us, and that's the main thing.
It's touch and go.
Touch and go. Touch and go. So
Right.
we're gonna talk today, mate, about Robbie Roddis and not
Charlie
Robbie Roddis
Wesencraft.
as well, and Charlie Wesencraft as well. We're going to talk about the pair of them, I suppose that you were lucky enough to have him over to your house for a game, and it was featured in one of the magazines, Miniature Wargames, and in there you interviewed the man himself. So I am going to interview you today, and you're going to tell me all about Charlie. So he is from your neck of the woods, isn't he?
Yeah, Charlie's originally from South Shields, which is just towards the end of where the wall starts, the
Yeah.
wall that we keep the jocks out. Yeah, and Charlie Charlie went to Hexham Grammar School, which is a very good grammar school, and he was born in 1928. And to be honest, he was a really decent chap per se, but he was also. It's quite sad sometimes because obviously things have changed the way we do things, and Charlie wrote 2 brilliant books. Obviously, with Pike and Shot and Practical Wargaming. Practical Wargaming.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, both signed by Charlie.
Oh, I've got a new copy. I've got a new copy. I lost mine.
No. But the point was anyway. He actually, when I spoke to him, to go back to when it was in 1990, it was when I decided to do all the big battles throughout history, and I started with Blenheim. Now, Charlie had written an article in a magazine called Wargames, which was a small magazine issued by the Military Modelling, and he had a small set of rules in there, which were based on 6mm, and everything was on one base, everything you needed, and it was luckily a war game with John Reedy, who is Mr. Rules, and John had a look at the ideas that Charlie come up with and said, "These are brilliant, we've got to do it." So we did, and we started with Battle of Blenheim. So we created every regiment, and I built the tables for it, and then I thought I should really like Charles to be there.
Yeah.
And it's before emails, so I wrote a letter to Paul Stevenson of the American Civil War fame, who I knew Charlie quite well, and Paul got him to come across to an old hall we'd hired, and we had a thrash with the Battle of Blenheim, which was then later put into Practical Wargamer.
Oh,
The famous
the magazine's out. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. Charlie played the English, and I played the Bavarians, and I got absolutely hammered. So, but nothing new there. But to be fair to that, he was a brutal war gamer, very nice blonde, but he was good. He was very good.
Yeah, we've got some more stories coming up later on the show of how he absolutely, I think they called it tabled these days, but but he was such a gentleman that you didn't know you'd lost.
No, he picked your pocket before you realised what had gone on. But to be fair to Charlie, so from there, I then started to do other games, do other battles, and I got him to come and refight Gettysburg.
Oh wow!
Where again he tonked us. We had a big. I hired a big hall that day. I did Austerlitz, where he fought as a Russian and tonked us, absolutely hammered us. And there was a bit of a theme here, but I then thought, no, we'll go big. So I then decided to invite him to come and have a go with the set of rules John put together of simple rules for 7 Years' War.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, he's not going to beat us here because he doesn't know anything about these rules. And of course, he tonked us. He absolutely battered us. And he was, in fact, I never won a game. But to be honest, he was so charming. You thought, well, what can you do? He was just a lovely man. So what happened was when I retired the first time, I decided I would like to interview some people. Well, originally it was about Peter Gilder, as you know. But and I knew Charlie knew Peter Gilder well, because we'll come on to that, but he knew Peter Gilder very well, and he knew John Braithwaite from Garrison very well. So I thought, I'll go along and interview him. Anyway, 7 hours later, my head's battered, and I couldn't write down enough of what he told us.
Yeah.
But I came out of it, and the one thing I couldn't believe was Charlie had been one of the original members of the very small group of wargamers. He was at the original first Wargames convention in England, down with Donald Featherstone. But he also was one of the original subscribers to the Wargames Digest by Jack Scrooby, right? Yeah. And anyway, I went to see him, and I got talking about these magazines, and he said, "Oh, I've got rid of them." He says, "I burnt them all in the garden about a month ago." I said, "Nobody wants those things." Anyway, I started crying just about. I said, "Oh, Charlie." So And that was my abiding. He didn't understand that. I was neat. I was breaking my heart. Right. He burnt
Mm,
them all. Anyway, I mean, I've got a lot of digests now. I was very lucky enough to get, and they are one of the best war games magazines ever
mm,
because they were really well produced. Bear in mind, since 1950s, you know. And
yeah.
then when Featherstone took over, I've managed to locate just about all of those. But Donald Featherstone, and it's interesting because him and Scrooby fell out big style.
Right.
And it was when you could do that, you know, when people had strong opinions. Where you know, anyway, Charlie was not like it. He was a cracking lad. You know, he was a good lad. But when he burnt all those magazines, I could have killed him. But
Oh,
anyway,
that's
so where would
shocking, shocking.
I could have killed him? So where would you like to start?
Charlie Wesencraft destroys wargaming history. That'd be your headline in the Daily Mail.
Honestly, what got me was he didn't even see any. You know, he didn't have any value to them. You see,
Yeah.
nobody wanted them. He thought.
Mm, yeah.
Because Charlie was a very private man, and he walked in with his people, his small group of people over the Shields way, and he'd pop up for conventions, but he never made a big fuss about anything. You know, he wasn't a personality as such. He was, but his big friends were Terry Wise and Stuart Asquith. They were good friends of his, and they used to war game together as a group. And he never saw anything about the fact that they were, you know, names really, or certainly personalities. You know,
Yeah.
so.
Do you think that private nature of Charlie is the reason why he's maybe not sung with Peter Gilder's name?
No, honestly, with Charlie, I think it was he just couldn't understand why anybody would want to be interested in what he was doing. So
Yeah.
he wasn't. I tell you what, he wasn't a shy bloke, but he war gamed and couldn't
Mm,
understand why people. You know, my understanding of Peter Gilder is he was just massively larger than life, right?
yes. Yeah.
Where Charlie was a very smart man, and but he didn't make a fuss about things. He was pretty typical English, really, you know, very self-deprecating. So, unlike certain people from Yorkshire. So,
Well, I don't know where that comes from. Where that comes from.
but anyway, I mean, I sat down with Charlie because I really wanted to get his story down. And the trouble is, he talked that much, I couldn't get all the notes done. Right, no matter how.
Yeah.
So I did as good as I could get. Right,
Yeah.
and it's quite a story, and
Mm.
you know, and I only wish apparently when they were going through his things after he'd passed away, he'd done another book, a fourth
Oh,
book, right?
yeah.
Because when I did this interview, he dropped in the conversation, "Oh, I did another book to follow on from the two you got published, which
Yeah.
nobody wanted."
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, you got to." Anyway, luckily John Curry published that,
He did.
and
Yeah.
then anyway, it turns out Charlie had done another book, which was just sat there. So I don't know if that'll ever be released, but I hope so because
Yeah.
it would be
I do as well.
a nice legacy. I
Oh,
know.
I do exactly. There's a lovely story at the start of your interview with Charlie about him being on holiday with his dad, and kind of that's where it all starts really with this Christmas present. And I wondered if you could remember that and maybe tell the audience about
Well, luckily, as you know, I have the notes.
it. It's like we planned it or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's unusual. Isn't
It is for me.
it? Well, actually, I mean, it was a lovely story because I asked him how you know how it started, and like everybody, you know, you have a story you really remember. And
Mm.
Charlie's was he said when he was 3, which I can't remember when I was 93. Anyway, he was 3, and he said they'd been to Derbyshire, and his dad's took him in the pushchair as he did then to the top of the hill where there was a castle. And after that, he became absolutely fascinated by all castles. Now,
Mm.
Charlie was a very skilled modeler and he was really good at stuff like this. So when Christmas came for his 4th birthday, Charlie's dad had got him a castle and soldiers. And to be honest, and his dad sat down with him and created a game out of it. So they had to defend the castle and everything after that. And he says after that, they were throwing pencils at the figures because that's what you did then. And it just grew from there. It grew into the hobby. Now, bear in
Yeah.
mind, so if Charlie was 3, so he was born in what,
28.
1928, so 1931, 32, right? So you're going to only have precast or maybe a few home cast figures, but from there he just grew and grew, and that was his key to Wargaming, the start of it, you know.
And he has another one of these random meetings, doesn't he?
Yeah.
That us wargamers seem to have, where we don't meet a serial killer, but we meet another wargamer.
Well, it's usually I meet them on the bus. They usually sat
Yeah,
next to us drooling, and he's
yeah.
either going to be a nutter or a wargamer. Yeah, but Charlie, to be honest, he talked about Duncan Brack. Now, what it
Mm,
was, he said he'd been in the pub one night, and one of his neighbours sat with him called Duncan Brack. Now, I recognise the name, but I don't know him. And anyway, Duncan mysteriously invited him round to his home the next night. Now, in this day and age, that would be the signal to run, right? But Charlie went round, and there was an American Civil War battle laid out with
oh,
plastic figures,
fantastic. Yeah.
with rules written by Jack Scrooby.
Mm,
Now, I've got a set of those rules, right? And they are pretty
oh,
basic. Yeah.
yeah.
And you can still buy them in America for about $300, so they're pretty expensive. But the
Mm,
point was, they both, Charlie remembered that they neither of them understood the rules,
yeah.
and they tried all night to work it out. And about 3 a.m., they stopped, and they'd only had 6 moves, right? But if you think about it, I mean, you will be too young, but you know, when you started out with the rules are very complicated. You know,
Mm,
you had to pay a penalty for everything. You had to know what sort of ammunition you had, the conditions, the wind. So they would have been detailed because we were, I would imagine, well, we were trying to look like we weren't playing toy soldiers. We
yes.
were
Yeah.
reenacting war.
Yeah.
The reality came later when you thought we are playing with toy soldiers, and to hell with it, you know.
Yeah.
But then it was about, look, we historians, and we know about war. But anyway, so they started with Airfix because in the early 60s, when Airfix first brought out the American Civil War range, which I got some for me Christmas box, and I just couldn't believe they were fantastic, especially
Yeah.
the Confederates. I love the Confederates. So, and he said that was the start of him modelling because, like
Yeah.
all other modelers, you had the Airfix magazine, and you had your pins, and you chopped them to bits and hacked them out. But
I, do,
I
I
know,
don't think there's I don't think there's a period in history that those early ACW haven't been converted into.
no.
Everyone,
Now,
oh yeah, I did some Romans and I converted from American Civil War. How did you do that?
yeah, exactly. I mean, I've got a lot of the early magazines where John Braithwaite describes how he hacks one with and uses banana oil, right?
Banana oil,
Yeah,
legendary.
yeah, and melting plastic, and you end up with this blob of plastic that stinks. And you
Yeah.
think, oh well, it looks like something, but but which brings me on to the first convention,
Mm,
and I'm not even certain how he ended up there, but basically he went, he was invited down to the first convention at
mm,
Southampton. And if you go back to the really early books, you'll see them all with the shirts and ties on, looking,
yes. Yeah.
grinning around there. And it, it was a pretty basic affair. Charles Grant was there. I mean, it was brilliant, really. But Charlie drove from Newcastle to Southampton, which in those days must have took forever. And he took Duncan down with him. But he said he had to deviate off to go to Reading to pick a man up that he didn't know to take him to the convention at
Wow.
Southampton. So I've got it here. I mean, what he said was that he remembers telling the chap he would meet him outside of Woolworths in Reading Town Centre at 11 a.m. And I thought everywhere had a Woolworths.
Yeah.
So, so anyway, sure enough, he found the Woolworths, but it was the wrong one. So they had to then go and drive around. But they found him eventually. Right? I mean, it's typical Charlie, So anyway, they went down, and
Yeah.
so that was it. But what he remembers was they had a dinner on that night that Miss
Mm,
Donald's wife made, and Donald made a speech, and nobody was prepared to stand up and say anything. So, so of course Charlie was volunteered to say something, and so so from there was a friendship born. So it was good, and he said, but he remembers that the room was pretty, the table was wonderful, and it had a trough round it, which was where you put your figures, which and he liked that. He liked that idea of having so. But at that convention, he met a bloke called John Braithwaite, who made metal figures and painted them. So John sold him some of his figures, right? And he paid 3p a figure at the time.
3p a figure, wow.
But they were painted.
Well, I
right?
painted as well, 3p.
Yep,
Wow.
yep. But he also, at that convention, he met a young man called Neville Dickinson, who went on to do found minifigs.
Yeah.
So what I know of John Braithwaite was, and I've got a lot of his early figures, the straight copies of Airfix. He's clear. Certainly the horses, he called them 20 mils, but they were a straight lift from an Airfix horse with an Airfix figure on. Yeah, well, it's what you did, isn't it? Yeah.
Do we know where this convention was? Was it at like a hotel, or
it was at his house?
Somebody's house?
No.
It was at his house.
Donald's house. Yeah.
Did he have a particularly big house there?
I don't think so, because Donald Featherstone at the time was a physiotherapist.
Right.
So I don't know how well paid they were, but I don't imagine them be that well paid. Although he did work for Southampton Football Club, so he might have had
a few quid there.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I doubt it.
Yeah, but it wasn't a lot of money. It wasn't a lot of money in football in them days, was there?
Certainly wasn't. And just like Yorkshire now, there's no money in football in Yorkshire, is there?
No.
But he was lucky enough to meet the personalities. Although, funny enough, when I asked him about Charles Grant, who was a big hero of mine, he couldn't remember much about him, So, which is a shame, because I really, Charles Grant was the man for me,
Yeah.
Especially, especially the war game. Anyway.
Yeah,
yes,
I mean, he clearly met all those people, and you talk in your interview about a few of them, and Don Featherstone, who we've mentioned ourselves earlier on, was one of them, and he's kind of one of those. Certainly, I'm not going to say your generation and my generation, Robbie, because I don't want to cause an argument, but. the more mature wargamers amongst us who are listening will know Don Featherstone from all his books and wargaming through the ages and the various things that he's done. So Charlie was a friend of Don's then?
Well, yeah, he was. I mean, when I asked him about Donald, because he was a subscribed to the magazine, the newsletter, then they would write letters to each other constantly, type of thing. And of course, he got to meet him a lot. And he mentions, and I can't remember which one of the magazines, but Donald Featherstone did a presentation at Hastings of the Battle of Hastings. And Charlie, for whatever reason, drove down. And
likes his driving, doesn't he?
Well, you say he had a proper job. He had a real job with a car. So, man, I mean, I lived in a village. I think there was about 5 cars in the whole village. So, So in the 60s, it was, But anyway, and he said that Donald Featherstone did the commentary, and the bit he always remembered was, all these people would have been stood around thinking, "Oh, this is wonderful," and then there he goes. He picks up. Donald picks up Harold, the figure for King Harold, and said an arrow hit him in the eye, and he fell, and then he threw it under the table, and that was the end of King Harold. And and then what do you know? Somebody then boomed, and then Harold got up again, and then they put the figure back on the table. So anyway, it was. But I mean, I know history now says that he didn't die with an arrow in his eye, but who knows? But one of the key meetings that he did have that he treasured was he met David Chandler, who was another big hero of mine because of the campaigns of Napoleon, and and he also was a big he was a big driving force in the Napoleonic Association, which obviously you don't see much of now, but was 70s and 80s was really popular.
Huge,
Yeah,
huge thing.
yeah. And he said that Chandler organised, because obviously he was at Sandhurst with Peter Young. They organised the refight of Borodino. That's probably why Charlie beat us, because he knew what he was doing. See? So
Yeah,
anyway,
he's got a bit of practice. Got a bit of practicing beforehand. Bit of pre-season training
yeah,
just for
yeah,
you, Robbie.
yeah. But what got me was he says he remembers that they did a text. They did an article about it in the newsletter, and because Donald used to write. They weren't like as a war game, and he was always write them as if it was history, right?
Right.
And he said, in the article, Charlie chastised him because he said 500 Russian generals fell with one cannon shot, and he always found that hilarious. So but that was typical, But what he said what was really good. He says remember that Chandler had created the church, one of the Burrendale churches, and all he'd done was stuck an onion on top of a cardboard thing, and said, right, that's the top of the church. But needs must,
Did,
doesn't
did
it?
he paint the Did he
No, he
paint the
didn't.
onion green?
No,
He
just stuck the
didn't.
onion.
Yeah.
Plopped it on top, stuck a stick in the top, and said, there you are, it's a Russian church.
And people
But,
today just don't bother with terrain, do they?
good. But no, I mean, so but the point was, and it gave Charlie the real drive to want to write, because Featherstone was starting to bring books out, and of course Charles Grant had brought his out, the war game, and there was an appetite for books, proper books on wargaming. So I think Charlie decided he would do that. But I'll stick on Chandler because you're going to talk about Blenheim, aren't you?
I am, mate. I've got a guest coming up to talk about Blenheim and the
Right, well, what
project.
it
So
was, David Chandler was very friendly with the Duke of Marlborough, Lord
as
Spencer.
we all are, as we all are.
Yeah, and he'd done a series of lectures at Blenheim House, Chandler, on various campaigns. But Chandler's big love was Marlborough. So Charlie was asked to create a proper model of the Battle of Blenheim. And I've seen some of Charlie's work. He's a very, very good modeler, really top quality. And he said that he'd rang him up, David had rang him up and said, would you do this model for the Duke of Marlborough? Because he wanted to do a series of battles at the palace, as you do. Yeah. So Charlie had done that, and that was in 2004, apparently. So he did the model, and then David Chandler rang back and said, well, you're right that the Duke would like a model, but he doesn't have very much money to build it. Right.
Oh, there we go.
So Chandler had offered poor Charlie's services because he was cheap, right? And he was set to, and they built a 10-foot table by 4 foot of the actual battle, using, and I mean of the time, bear in mind this is when Bacchus first started, using Bacchus figures, and I'm hoping Pete Burry will explain why he managed to get his feet under the table there. So anyway, apparently the Duke of Marlborough didn't want to open the exhibition, so they had to get David Chandler to open the exhibition. And he said it was a great day, but he was disappointed that it didn't meet Marlborough himself, which was a shame.
But, you would have hoped the Duke would have turned up for his cheap battlefield, wouldn't you?
Well, these people are a bit flighty at the best of times, aren't they? But you'll be too young to remember. But Charlie did a series of models and battle accounts in Military Modellings, right?
Yeah.
And he did a cracking one of Stirling Bridge, which was in the Practical Wargamer.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely model even now. You won't have them, but I've got all the magazines, and I'll bequeath them to you. All right.
Oh, thanks for that, mate.
That's all right, man.
Shall I send somebody for him next week?
Yeah, and thank you. But he also, Charlie was commissioned to do one of the Battle of Culloden, and but of course he said when he went back up there he didn't know where it was because he'd spent a fortune by then anyway. But he did one of Prudder Castle, which is in near Sunderland, Fulwell Windmill, Don't ask us why they wanted a windmill, but he did Hayden Castle in Corbridge, which was a lovely old castle, and he did a number of other castles just for people. I mean, and there's the theme. He said he was fascinated by the idea of a castle, and he just loved them. Yeah,
all from that
yeah,
childhood experience with his dad. Yeah,
yeah. And he also he did a couple of things about flooding, which is not far from where we all live. And so Charlie was a bit of an expert on the Scottish wars, and so he did a one in flooding as well, which I would love to see. But and Neville's Cross.
Neville's Cross, of course, of course. Uh, and so then we kind of move on then to Charlie writing and the two sort of classic books that were originally published. And of course, you've got an original signed by Charlie himself.
I have indeed, yes, yes.
I've got a reprint.
Cheap reprint.
cheap reprint. But he kind of described to you, didn't he, about how he came to write that first book. And you said earlier on about he was kind of following a trend with other people who were starting to write books for the hobby.
Yeah.
And I think he'd been in hospital. Is that right?
Well, I asked him. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to know about Practical Wargaming, which is a great book even now, right? And I'll tell you what it is, right? Those writers, especially Charles Grant and Charlie Wesencraft, it's the way they write.
Yes.
It's a very engaging way they write. It sort of it drags you in. I mean, don't get us wrong. I mean, a lot of the books we get now are really well written, very factual, but certainly Grant and Wesencraft would draw you into the actual thing. So he was having a hernia operation, would you believe, right? So, and he was sent to a convalescent home to recover. Unlike now, that's when we had the NHS. And
booted out now.
I know.
Get home.
So his poor wife at the home brought him a load of military history books, and he just decided there and then, I'm bored, I'm going to write a book. And then he said, anyway, he started writing the book, and he remembers limping back in one day, and there's the nurse reading the book, right? And she told him she found it fascinating. So it was obviously the first ever war game groupie, I thought,
Yeah, exactly.
So he said after that critical review, I knew I had to finish it because he was a bit of a ladies' man, I think. But
it looks that way.
Anyway, he sent it to a publisher who accepted it, which I'm really surprised at. Having tried to get books published myself, you normally don't get past the bin. But it was of a time when war game books were interesting. And he said he couldn't believe that he sold 1,500 copies in the USA, which was a lot. It really was then. And he got 8 pence per book royalties.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's old penny. That's old pennies as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it was real money. Yeah.
Yeah. Before the European decimalisation rubbish.
Yeah, well, but I mean, to be honest, it's a wonderful book. It really is. And anyway, he said the biggest compliment he ever got, he was in Newcastle Central Library, and he saw that they'd stolen his copy of Practical Wargamer, which he found really a compliment. He couldn't even buy it; they had to pinch it out of the library.
Somebody's stolen my book. That's good. That.
Yeah, well, that's how
you don't steal stuff you don't want, do you?
No, not at all. No.
You either need it or it's got great value.
Exactly.
When you're a thief. So I don't know which one it was, but
So I asked him. I had to ask him about his second book, which is my favourite, Pike and Shot. And he said that Donald Featherstone wrote a really good review for him, and it did relatively well for him. So he decided to write one on the Pike and Shot, which was his big love. But when he wrote it, the publishers weren't that interested, and because they thought it was a passing fad. Wargaming was a passing fad. Right, it had lived its life and was gone. So anyway, luckily, because Donald Featherstone had just had a book released that had been selling well, he convinced them to give it a go, and it did really well. It did really well because it contained obscure battles. There wasn't that ability to research like there is now. So anywhere you could find something with information on a battle, it was a godsend. And Charlie had done a lot of work on it. So and that was the point. He knew his stuff. He knew his proper history. So he said that it did really well. So bless him. But it was a good book. It is a good book.
So, just for a second, going back to the practical wargaming book, because
Yes.
that was very interesting in that there was a sort of a general introduction into wargaming, and a few stories from Charlie, and then it moved into like an overarching set of rules, which is kind of a modern way of thinking, a bit like black powder and all that kind of. You have one set of rules and then different things to fit in for
Yeah.
each of the periods, and that's kind of where the rest of the book is, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
going into, I think it's eight, is it eight different periods
Yep.
within the book. So that's just led us into modern rule sets straight away.
Well, the thing was, and I don't think you've got to understand. I mean, this book was published when 1974,
74.
right?
Mm,
1974. A lot of wargamers were still using single figures,
yeah.
and Charlie didn't advocate that. He was into stands, right?
Mm,
And so in the rules, he talks about stands for multi-figure stand games, etc. And even then, he was already drawn up ideas of how to make, how the figures would look. And it was, it became a bit of a theme for him, because when he introduced brigade stands, for big battles and worked out, and
mm,
honestly, it was fantastic for that. But I mean, he still taught about single figure games. But the beauty is that he introduced a lot of nice ideas that were carried on. And
mm.
to be, it's a great set of rules even now. I mean, I like this one, chapter 6, the ancient battles in the grand manner. And it isn't, this is before Peter Gilder took the name Grand Manor, by the way. So, but the
Did he steal?
idea
Did he
was,
steal it from? Did he steal it from
no,
that chapter?
no, I don't think so. I would, I would hate to say that. I don't think so. Who knows? But I tell you what,
We need to check, mate. We need to
I don't.
check.
Yeah, right. I tell you what I love is the photographs. Because I love these photographs. They're just phenomenal. But the rails
Yeah,
themselves are tremendous. And
yeah.
he was ahead of his time. Bless him.
So, so,
Yeah.
so for the younger members of the audience who are listening, the photographs are all black and white, aren't they?
Yeah.
And the figures are real. I mean, as they would be, obviously in 1974, they're old school. But what I do like, and one thing that we haven't kind of mentioned, are the organisation tables that
Yeah.
he used to put in these books. But again, I can see the links there to Rapid Fire and the way they do stuff, and other sets of rules as well. So absolutely, I'm going to say groundbreaking.
Yeah, it was. Honestly,
Yeah.
fantastic book. It really is. The thing I like is there's Charlie on the back, bless him, with a shirt and tie on. Wargamers had his sartorial elegance then, didn't they?
They did. It was a
Yeah.
different world. You're not like us two slobbing it in some t-shirts. We
Yeah,
we
well, I
we.
didn't I didn't tell you what I'm wearing as a pair of shorts, right? It's a pair of
I don't.
budgie smugglers,
Budgie
right?
smugglers.
All
Oh
right.
my word.
It's to help me
Oh
with
dear
me
me.
hernia.
Yeah. Thankfully, all listening audience, I can only see face and his shoulders. Thank God. but,
Uh,
but yeah, so we were talking about his second book, Pike and Musket, and
yeah,
that contained a lot of scenarios, didn't it, or write-ups of battles in
yeah.
there that, as you said, were not that easy to research in those days.
Well, I mean, the Battle of Yellow Ford, right? 1598. Back in 1975, 76, there wouldn't have been that much information about it, full stop. But he had a
Mm,
basic understanding of it, and he was able to give enough detail to fight it.
yeah,
And there's a lovely Battle of Pinky, another great battle. But back then there was very little information. Well, I think we just started the Pike and Shot Society,
yeah.
and even so there wouldn't have been a lot of information kicking about. And of course, when you get onto the bigger battles, the English Civil War battles, they're fantastic.
Mm.
Marston Moor, it's a belter. And I haven't fought it for years. It's a
I
shame,
used to
but
stop. I used to stop and have my lunch at work at the Marston Moor Memorial. It's a good little place to park your car up and have a sandwich.
it's typical, yeah. But he also walked them. You see, the
Yeah,
local ones, he'd walk them, so he understood the topography of it all. So he was,
yeah.
because again, he trained initially. He'd been in university doing a degree in architecture, and then realised he had the ability and went and joined the local went and joined the local council. But he still always did stuff, with architecture. Yeah, he was a good lad like that, But
Yeah, because of his age, he would have just missed the war, wouldn't he? And he would have been
oh,
a national service lad, I would imagine.
well, I've got to read this right because he did right. He was in national service. In fact, he must have been the oldest acting commander of his regiment in the artillery when I spoke to him. He must have been amazing that on. Oh yeah, because he joined that on right. So he joined. He's originally joined the 55th, sorry, the 5th Infantry Regiment, right?
Yeah.
But he ended up moving into. He got a commission, right? And he joined the artillery, and and it's just so typical of him. Like, so he was a lieutenant in the artillery, right?
Mm.
Trained on 25 pounders, and then they decided because he could use a typewriter, he had a potential, so he became the administrator in the regiment, right?
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, but on top of that, they'd asked him, "Oh, I understand you were a Boy Scout before you joined." He said, "Oh yes." He says, "Right, can you erect all these tents for these 20,000 soldiers we're going to have here?" So, so poor Charlie had to draw a plan up and then get him and his team to erect all the tents. So he said, but it's a bit like Featherstone, Featherstone was in
Mm.
the tank regiment, but he was, because he could type, they made him the guy in
Yeah.
charge of the typewriter. So he was lucky he didn't get in the tanks. That was typical of them, wasn't it? But what got me was going back to the tent thing was the bloody tents blew away. There was a huge storm the night before, and he says when we got there, everything had just gone. So he said, so, but he loved it. He loved it,
Yeah.
and after he left, during his 2 years, he joined the TA, and he became the chairman of the 101st Artillery Regiment in Newcastle,
Oh,
and
brilliant.
that was into his 70s and 80s, 1980.
That,
So he was 80
yeah.
odd year old then. But
Oh,
so there's
fantastic.
hope for you yet.
Absolutely. There is. I can still command the. Well, we don't have a Yorkshire regiment. Oh, yes, we do.
You
I can't,
do?
yeah, they joined all the battalions up, didn't they?
They did.
They did, yeah. And so, yeah, wonderful, wonderful story. I wanted to get that in as well as all the other stuff that we've talked about. And then he goes on, doesn't he, to write a third book, the
Yep.
the, the trilogy. The But it never saw the light of day initially, which I think is a big shame.
Well, I got talking about why he didn't continue the series
Mm,
because, I thought they'd been a huge success. Obviously, they just sold a
yeah,
few. And he
yeah,
said he'd written a third, and it was never. He said it was never published. He couldn't find a publisher for it, and he worked on a theme for it because he was fascinated by the American War of Independence. So he
yeah,
started with the refight of Braddock's massacre, and it was 12 steps to freedom. He described it as, and it was
yeah.
about key military events. Now, of course, John Curry kindly brought it out in the end, and funny enough, that's mine and John's latest period in the War of Independence, and we're
Ah,
basing
excellent.
everything on Charlie's book because the book was so good for the scenarios that it's a great way to start. That's if John ever finishes painting the armies, of course. But
Quick dig, quick dig.
I know, but the point was, it was a book that I mean, he really threw a lot of work into it. Actually, I think at the time when I was asking him about it, it was quite disappointed that nobody was interested in it.
Hmm.
And then, of course, luckily John Curry came along and helped them produce it.
Was
I
it
know it.
was it just that as we said earlier on with the second book, he had to kind of push it because they thought that the War Games fad had gone. Was it for the publishers? It had gone, and they just weren't interested.
You've got to understand, I mean, whereas Donald Featherstone was prolific, and was also near to where there was certain publishing people. Here in the northeast, we don't have that opportunity. You know, we're an area where we don't have a lot of book publishers at that time, and so Charlie wouldn't know where to go. Plus, you know, yeah, I know Terry Wise had some books published, and but you know, he didn't really have the not the kudos, but the status I would imagine that Charles Grant, and of course, and don't forget that I mean Charles Grant was well connected to other people who you know Chandler was very pushes them and all this. So it's all about who you know in it. I think in some respects, you know. And Charlie wouldn't push himself.
Yeah, no, that's the thing I think, isn't it? That, but the book's out now, and I haven't got a copy of it. I will have to get a copy after I've done this.
Oh, I'll lend you mine. It's signed.
Yeah. Oh, another one signed. Oh,
I wouldn't let him leave the house till he signed all the books.
Sign that. Sign that.
Hey, I tell you what. Our last wanted to get him to stay. She loved him. He was that funny.
Oh.
And I thought, I bet you being a boy in your days, lad. I tell you honestly, I said, I'm not leaving you loose with our lass. You'll have that all year. I tell you. But it was quite a lad.
Yeah, fantastic. And moving on with the kind of from the books, he was also involved in, and we spoke about this when we spoke about Peter Gilder, about the famous Battleground series that was on Tyne T's telly back in the day. And you can, for those younger listeners, you can get, I think there's 3 or 4 of them on the YouTubes. And kind of, he was one of the early pioneers in that show, wasn't he?
I don't know how. He did explain. I knew Charlie had been the man behind it, right? I knew he had, right? But he was working for the council, as I said, right? And he was asked by North Tyneside Council to do a series of 6 historical war games for them, which just shows you how cutting edge they were then, you know?
Yeah.
And on the first night that he did his first presentation, wherever it was, he said there was 2 ladies came along from a local television company and asked him about wargaming, which, you know, that must be the only 2 at the time. Anyway, he says out the blue he got a call from Tyne T's television, right?
Yeah.
And they asked him to write 6 scripts for a television series, right?
Wow.
And originally he said, I want you to write them about the commanders, because he wanted to do Hannibal at Cannae, etc., etc. But the producers said that people probably knew them well, wouldn't know who he was, who he was. And to be honest, he was right, you know. So they asked him to do Julius Caesar instead. But anyway, when he said, I did the scripts, and each one was written on 1 page of foolscap. That was it, right? He said, but originally, you know, he got John Braithwaite to prepare the battles with him, and they decided to do a pilot. And he says the thing that struck him. He says the producer was this woman who was a vicar's daughter, and he says she swore like a trooper, and he was absolutely appalled. He says the language was atrocious. Anyway, he said there was this young guy there called Peter Gilder, right? And he said he was supposed to do the first battle. And anyway, he got stage fright and fainted, right? He had an anxiety attack and had to be taken to hospital, right? So Peter is rushed off to hospital. The producer's effing and blind at Gilder as he's carried out the door. And then Charlie and John Braithwaite had to do the pilot, right?
Yeah.
And he says, he said he wanted us to throw a 6 to hit a gun. So literally throw the 6 to hit the gun. So anyway, we had to cheat a bit apparently to stage all the things. And he said there was smoke blowing everywhere. We couldn't see the figures, couldn't see the table, but it got accepted, right? It got accepted and released. And of course, Gilder came back and he obviously, I don't know if you've seen the series.
Yeah.
I mean, he tortured John Braithwaite. You know, he'd have been done for bullying now, and of course, and he really ragged poor John Braithwaite. But he said that you know, he was happy to take a back seat, write the scripts, get it all set up, and let others, you know, and that was a great thing for Peter Gilder.
Do the limelight. Yeah.
Well, it was a great thing for Gilder. Obviously, he'd set him on his way,
Yeah.
And of course, he met Callan, which became a big thing in its own right. But he also did another television series.
Yes, I saw this, and I'm trying to remember if I know Bob Johnson.
Bob
Um,
Johnson was he was a bit of an icon up here, right? Because he was so useless as a weatherman. It was like Mr. Bean of weather, right? And when we were young people, we'd watch Bob, and I thought I could do that job. He was a hoot, right?
yeah,
So it was called Bob's Battles,
Bob's Battles.
and there was
Oh
a
my
series
word!
of 10 battles, right? And Bob would walk around a local battlefield with Charlie, and they'd talk about the actual battle, right?
Yeah,
Right? He said, but Bob always forgot his lines, right? He just would get them wrong. He said he was a really nice man, right? He says, but
yeah,
as a presenter, hopeless. And
yeah.
but he said he got a lovely card from him at the end saying, "Well done, Charlie. You're a true professional." Blah blah blah. But Bob's battles. Now I can't remember them. I really
So
can't.
that would that just have been local TV?
Yeah, Tines.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tyne Tees. Yeah,
very much a niche market. To have somebody
yeah.
walking around, a weatherman walking around a local battlefield talking about the battle with a man from the council. It's
That
it's
is
it's it's
ultimate local telly.
it's BAFTA. It's a BAFTA award. You can see it, can't you?
So, if anyone out there has got a copy on VHS or
I can't
anything,
imagine.
just
Or even better,
I would love to see it.
have a Bob, have a actual physical photograph or images of Bob Johnson delivering the weather. Because I'll tell
Yeah,
you, oh, he was hilarious. He was so bad, but but uh, but I'll tell you know what it is. You think about it. The television companies were prepared to try then, but of
yes,
course, Wargame doesn't really work well on TV. It doesn't. I mean, it's very difficult to try and make it interesting to the extent where you can fix
yeah.
people's attention. And I know they tried, but I just don't know how they could do it. I just don't know how they could.
Yeah. We had that Time Commander series, didn't
I
we?
like
Which had
that. I
the
like that.
that was quite good. And I know there was rumours of something similar, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, with figures where they did. I think it was Channel Five today, like a railway model railway, and they'd like have 5 clubs, and they'd set them a challenge, and they all had to do stuff. And there was talk about there being a spin off into War Games with that, but nothing has come
Well, I
from it that
enjoyed
I'm
the
aware of.
the five clubs one.
Yeah.
Although I always thought war games were strange, but the they're really strange. But to be honest, it's a shame. But then again, it's such an insular thing. You don't want to
Mm.
say, I mean, nowadays the language coming from me is just it's atrocious. It is honestly. I mean, I've got to the stage where I've got Tourette's. I know you have, but
Yeah, I'm exactly the same, mate.
oh well, you're not as old as me, so.
Maybe I'm going to get worse.
uh, but anyway, I've got to tell you this, right? Because it wasn't the end of Charlie's film career, right?
Yeah,
Because Gilder had the idea to make a film,
yeah.
right? A War Games film. And I said to him, why don't we stage a famous battle with the troops physically moving, like a
Mm.
bit like Wallace and Gromit? And anyway, so the idea was to place them, move them slightly, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, apparently they did a little bit of it, and Frank Hinchliffe, who was going to pay for the cost, and Peter Gilder saw it, and they just burst out laughing and said, "Charlie, this is not going to work." He said it was like a silent
Oh dear.
film with
Yeah.
these ridiculous things, and he just said, they just said, "Look, it's not going to work," But
That
it was
would
a nice idea.
yeah,
Yeah.
a stop motion war game. I'm not sure whether
Wallace
even
and Gromit.
Spielberg, yeah, even Spielberg could make that work. But yeah,
Uh,
that's definitely an interesting thing.
please ask me about. Charlie was invited to the first ever conference of wargamers.
Yeah.
So, for younger members, the Conference of Wargamers, which still exists, was an organisation put together by, at the time, Paddy Griffiths, who was
Mm.
very, very controversial. larger than life, argumentative son of a bitch, who I can remember writing. He wrote an article in one of the magazines about Wargaming should have no figures, and
All right.
the hoo-ha was just horrendous.
Mm.
I mean, if there'd been emails now, God, the hate mail would have been horrendous. Anyway, he said, so he was invited down to the first cow, and the idea was they were looking for alternative ways to play war games. And I said, well, what did you think? What did you think of it? And Charlie was always very polite, and he says, he didn't take to the ideas, right? Is
All right. Yeah.
how I wrote it.
Yeah.
What he actually said, it was the biggest pile of shite he'd ever seen. But he says they were all given hats at the
Right.
convention, right? And Charlie was meant to be a colonel of cavalry, and he was supposed to go around talking to the other delegates about the coming battle, right?
Yeah.
And Charlie said, I just couldn't handle it. He said, I felt so ridiculous. He just walked out, threw the paper hat away, and walked out. He says, and that's how he met Stuart Asquith. He said, I just couldn't.
Had he thrown his hat away as well?
They just couldn't. They just couldn't bring themselves to wear paper hats. But the point is, they had some good ideas, Cal.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that DBA came out of it from those ideas. So not my favourite rules, but it did help, and that was the thing.
Was
But
it professional war gamers or hobby war gamers or a mix of both?
no, Paddy Griffiths again was a Sandhurst
Yeah.
man, so he knew a lot of people in the great and good of the war games world. I think he was pitching it more towards the up and coming people.
Yeah.
It's like Andy Callan. Andy Callan was
Yes.
always one who was always really working on a new idea all the time. So
Mm.
his type of thing. Except Andy was more about practical rules. His rules were always. I always found them really good, always interesting, and it was great.
Mm.
But they were more. Paddy Griffiths could be really controversial. I mean, do you ever see he hosted the I think it was Game of War where they used plastic pieces of plastic to represent the
All right.
troops,
Yeah. No, I don't remember that.
and well, and basically the idea was great. They refought the charge of the Light Brigade with blocks of plastic, and it just. But you didn't get to know how the rules work. Who was the other guy who was with him? Because the other guy would roll a large dice and say, "Oh, they've lost 600 men or whatever." It was
Yeah.
there was no
Yeah.
anyway. But he was ahead of his time. But he said he was ahead of his time. Bless him.
And I think then you asked Charlie about universal sets of war games rules, and
Oh,
that his book was really a universal set of war
yeah,
games rules
yeah.
in itself. And like I said earlier on, it's just absolutely groundbreaking. That idea.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I mean, Charlie, he said it's not the rules aren't important.
Mm.
He said you have to. It's all about. It should be about the historical tactics, right?
Mm.
And the rules should allow you to do that without making it. But but he always had good ideas. I mean, he talked to me about using hexagons, the idea of having troops, and of course zones of control. And isn't Hyman Miller, the guy who's Simon Miller, doesn't he have
Yeah.
areas where you can only operate
Yeah,
inside of?
it's like a grid
Yep.
system on
Again,
squares rather than axes.
command and
Yeah.
colours, which I really like. And Charlie said, the idea was the game comes first, and the rules should allow that game to feel like a historical battle.
Mm.
Which, to be fair, is the way I think modern rules have gone to a certain extent. I think they do try to make it a game first, reflecting a proper historical period, except when
Because I
I'm
think,
fighting.
yeah. Because I think Charlie was shortly after that. Then came the table-heavy, super detailed, really concentrated rules, and we seem to have gone kind of from Charlie up and down, and we're back in a down section at the
Well,
moment.
don't forget, running parallel to the books that were released by Featherston and Charlie, we had Bruce Quarry.
Yes.
Now, I've got the Bruce Quarry books and I love them, but
Mm.
the rules, even now, I haven't the Scoobies, right? I
We
loved.
actually played Waterloo with them.
Well, I don't know how
Uh,
you achieved that. I really didn't because,
oh,
but
I'm quarter reaction time, quarter move reaction time. It's all up here, mate.
I liked the idea of the national characteristics. There was a lot of
Yes,
detail in
I
there,
like that.
and
Yeah.
he used to argue about, well, how come the Spanish are this bad, and but Charlie didn't believe in that. He said, no, a soldier's a soldier. It's the tactics that were used at the time and how they were exercised and everything else. Same as obviously Featherstone and Grant. They insisted it's about morale, the training levels,
Mm,
and everything else that goes with it, and how they were led, not the rules. Because I mean the classic one is I can remember reading about an account where Gilda was fighting somebody and he charged his lancers against a wall where there was British infantrymen,
mm.
and apparently he wouldn't allow the infantrymen to attack the lancers because the lancer was longer than the musket, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
so the British infantry were wiped out because the lancers could kill them, but they couldn't get at them, and that was pushing rules to the nth degree, which and Charlie
I
didn't want
think
any of that.
yeah, I think Peter Gilda's Lancers were never defeated if all the stories I heard are true.
Well, I get the impression that you were. It's a bit like Peter Young, with his where he'd move the troops around at night. So the next morning when
Yes,
he came,
yeah, I
the,
heard about that.
yeah, yeah, and they were characters, and
Yeah,
where now would there be hello, and obviously you doing that survey at the moment, aren't you? Then it
yeah,
was just accepted that he's the host, you're the guest, get on with it. I can remember many years ago when I was wargaming, when I was first starting, I remember fighting a lad who had a beautiful table, and he had these Nassau infantry. He classed as elite, and they could shoot. I've never seen anything like it. They just shot the living daylights out of me, and I could never understand how they'd never won any wars. But
yeah,
that was the host. You just go on with it. So, but I digress. But I asked Charlie about how I know you tend to ask favorite favorite this favorite that, and
yeah.
I was surprised because I asked him about his favorite book, and he said, "Oh, the Waterloo Companion." Now I was expecting something really obscure, but no, he said the Waterloo Companion, which I must admit I've got it. I love it,
Yeah, it is
and
a great book.
but and his favorite historical character was Marlborough, and you know why, don't you? Apart from the
Go
fact he never lost a battle, he said because uh, Churchill serviced his wife twice while still wearing his campaign boots, right? And, and I thought, yeah, I can say you doing that, Charlie. And that was the thing. That was his. He said he never lost a battle, and he fettled his wife with a pair of boots on. I think
yeah,
you can't argue with that, can you? You're going to have to
no,
X-rate this, and it's going to be like Pete and the
no.
Dud. This, all right, mate. Uh, you know,
Fantastic.
and I said, of all the personalities and he said, who was the
Mm,
most influential, and he said Donald Featherstone, and
yeah,
he's just said Donald Featherstone was the man, and he was. I mean, I know he had his detractors he was very forthright, and
mm,
but by the same token, he never gave up on promoting the hobby, and it's if you read the editorials of some of the magazines, you're thinking, God, life has changed because a spade is a spade, and he
yeah,
just never held back, and it was great. And to be honest, Terry Wise was the same, and David Stuart Asquith was even worse in his editorials. He used to blast all sorts of people for everything, and the beauty is, well, because you could say that then, they're from an era where the truth mattered more than
yeah.
sensibilities. Charlie
I
was
think,
never,
I think, yeah, I think that's a
Charlie
really,
wasn't like that.
yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. And quite often, when I get into trouble, it's because I've said something that's just true. Oh, well, you can't say, the latest one is factions and the use of factions to describe an army.
All
And
right,
I'm just totally against it. And I always tell the story that my granddad was in the Eighth Army in the
yeah,
desert. And if I said, Oh, you're in the Eighth Army, Grandad. Was that the British faction? He would have grabbed his entrenching tool out of the garage and smacked me around the back of the head with it, because it
Well,
quite clearly isn't. And that needs for me that needs to be challenged
it does.
for people.
Do you know, my dad and your dad might have known each other because my dad was in the Eighth Army as well, and
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't talk very much. Just didn't, and he only ever said two things about the war because my poor dad had flat feet. Now he was in the DLI, who marched pretty fast, right? And he said before El Alamein, his section put all their rations of carnation milk together, fermented it, and got drunk on it. So when they went over the top, he said we hadn't a clue where we were walking around in circles. They hadn't a clue, right? And it wasn't very nice about the Arabs, I must admit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
won't go into that.
Mm.
But he says the other thing was he was at Monte Casino as well, and he hadn't a good word to say about the Americans at all because they bombed them that many times. They lost more men through the Americans than the Germans, and but he did come back. I've got a lovely fascista scarf from an Italian
Oh,
officer.
nice. Yeah.
Two of the collar pins. There was a ring, and my mum said never ask him how he got it. Right.
Right.
So, but I do know he got it off the corpse of an Italian officer. So, and that was my dad's war, carnation milk and getting bombed by the Americans. It's quite, he wasn't in any faction. Just to touch on this idea of the factions. Many years ago, I used to work with a man who'd been in the DLI, and he'd been in Dunkirk, was captured at Dunkirk, and he said, we surrendered. He said, and he was hit in the face by somebody from the Waffen SS, broke his jaw and
Mm.
everything. And he says, we were fighting them. We had Brumshanks. They had tanks. He said, we had
Yeah.
young posh boys and they had proper generals. He said, we hadn't a chance. And he said, when the war was ending, he said, we woke up one day and there was no guards there. And they marched across Czech through France. He said, we stole as we went. We ripped the place apart, stealing everything. And
Yeah.
he's, what faction's that for then? Brum.
Yeah.
He said
Yeah.
we the Broomshanks. That's all we had. I know he's exaggerating, but
Yeah. Yeah.
work that
I
one
think.
out.
I think. I think it's dangerous if you start to sort of desensitize things, and the SS just becomes a faction, and you don't learn about what they did and how they
Yeah.
performed, and the same for the Japanese, same for all sorts of nasty people in history. You need to learn about them. They're not just a faction within a game, that
Well,
you just.
that's more to do with the Games Workshop influence
Yes, it is. Yeah.
because and I'm not decrying them because I've got a lot of time for Games Workshop stuff, although it's expensive. But that's
Mm.
how the mindset was, and when they come across, like that young lad I talked to from the magazine and said, who's Charles Wesencraft, and he
Yeah.
explained he'd been a Games Workshop guy. So how would he
Yeah.
know? You know what I mean?
Mm.
And of course, like a lot of history now, young people don't know. They don't need to go looking for sources, do they? You know what I mean? So they don't need to do anything like that. They just get the set, play the game.
Yeah. And
Is that a bad
I
thing?
think it's yeah. No, but I think it's a good thing that people like me and you maybe try and point them in the direction of the history so that they do realise that this isn't just a plastic model; it's somebody's
No,
granddad. Yeah.
no.
So we could try our best. We could try, but anyway, we've gone off topic as we
Yeah, sorry,
always
mate.
do, mate. Um,
Uh,
so really, that's kind of a summary of the interview that you did with Charlie, and I kind of wanted to just round off really with just some of your thoughts about Charlie, the man himself, and his place in wargaming history, if you like.
well, I was talking to John Coates when he rang us to explain that Charlie had died, and
Mm.
he'd been speaking to Charlie, and Charlie had just bought the new Hail Caesar rules
Oh wow!
2 weeks before,
Ah,
right? And
bless
and
him at
he, and he was saying,
97.
yeah,
Fantastic.
and he was saying to John, he says, they're very complicated, these, John. I don't quite understand how they work, right? And and that's the thing. He was always looking. I mean, at 97, and he'd given
Mm,
away a lot of his figures, and he'd got rid of a lot of his stuff. He was in a home, so but he was still interested in wargaming, and I think that's a great. Bearing in mind he's gone right through his entire life playing games, playing with soldiers,
mm,
and I think, and apart from that, he was always a pleasure to play with and against, even though he beat the living daylights out of us, and I'll not forget that. But he was also,
repeatedly.
yeah, but he was also a very, very interesting man. So the point is, even if you just sat and had a pint with him, so that's how I
Yeah,
judge people now. That's how shallow I am. Would I like to have a pint with him? And if the
yeah,
answer's
yeah. No, that's a
no,
good way.
yeah,
Mm,
and that's how I work. And unfortunately, some people I wouldn't have a drink with, but Charlie, I would happy to sit with him all night because
mm,
he'd be able to tell you something that was really interesting or entertaining without being rude, right? So that was good. And we, they're all virtually gone now. All the people that are,
mm,
we started with. So
mm.
as we lose them, it's nice if you can remember them for the place in the hobby. I mean, we lost, we lose them. I mean, we're all, well, you're not, but we're getting old. And
I am, mate.
well, I know, but I laugh. I say Paul Stevenson, but I still think his American Civil War book, which is an Airfields book, is one of the best books that ever came out for American Civil War. And Paul is still looking for that magic set of rules for American
Yeah,
Civil War, and that's 50 odd years. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
we're and that's for me. Charlie is a perfect example of a true war gamer, but a decent bloke as well. That'd be a
Mm,
nice thing to have on your epitaph, a decent fella. You know,
yeah.
Owed me a pint. Oh, you know what a great way, what a great epitaph. But honestly, he was a delight, and
Yeah.
it's really sad that he's gone. But I think at the end of the day, he achieved what he wanted to achieve. You know,
Mm.
so that's good.
And I think that the very fact that we're talking about him now, the fact that I've spoken about him with other people, and
Yeah.
and everyone has had nothing but positive
No,
things to say about him,
no.
and they were all defeated. You don't need to feel bad, Robbie, because he absolutely slaughtered the other people that I've spoken to as well. So he was a bit of. It's kind of a war games black sheep, really, in that he didn't really ooze this he's like a silent assassin. He didn't really ooze this confidence of
No,
ability and generalship. He just wiped everyone off
he
the
was just.
table.
I just think he was one of these people who he played the tactics of that
Yeah,
time and
yeah,
was able somehow to keep rolling those sixes. And I just, but you couldn't dislike him for it. Sometimes you think,
no,
God, is he ever going to stop? And he's just good at it. So, and if he had a setback, he just came back again and annoyed the living daylights out of you. So it was just great. He just honestly, just a really, really decent man. You know, and
brilliant.
so if you ever have to interview somebody about me, you'll never get that, right?
I'll send you a message to say what I'm going to say if they interview me about you,
Don't say that.
mate.
But seriously, if you can get some of the older, just keep looking for the older magazines. Like, this one from Wargames, which was a military model, and Charlie was always asked to go into them and write something, and it was always a really informative article with a new set of ideas for rules, and that's the way he was.
That's
So
fantastic.
I
And to
know,
and
mate.
to hear that he was still buying rules at 97 is
I know.
has made my day. That's absolutely brilliant.
Do you know that? Do you know?
Th-
Just to interrupt you just before, because his
yeah,
final words apparently were, because he told his son, he says, "I'm just going to go to sleep now." Now I think that's a lovely way to say, "I'm just going to go to sleep now," and he went to
yeah,
sleep. And that to me is, I felt
yeah.
like saying, "Wake him up! He's still throwing them bloody sixes." But
Yeah,
anyway,
no. Well, I think it's a good way to end this is just for me to say thank you, Charlie, for setting the hobby up the way that you did and producing some fantastic books that are seminal volumes in the hobby today. And yeah, thank you.
cheers. Cheers, Ken.
Cheers.
Can I get me tea
Thanks a
now?
lot, mate.
Cheers now.
Yeah, you can, mate.
Good lad.
Chapter 2. Preparation or a battle. As with most hobbies, wargaming can be expensive, or relatively less so. It is possible to fight battles using coloured cardboard as pieces, set out on a small card table using a ruler to determine distance and a single die with which to record the hits. Or again, one can fight battles using only a map, drawing in the various regiments and rubbing them out again as they move or are destroyed. All possible, but not very satisfying. Once he has seen a number of 3/4 inch or 1/8 inch regiments of beautifully coloured figures set out in battle array, the enthusiastic would-be player will not rest until he is in possession of such an army of his own. These figures will either be made of plastic or of lead, the former being of a single body colour, a red or a blue or a grey, according to the whim of the manufacturer. The latter will be bought either as they come from the mould, a dull silver, often retaining some of the flash, or for the wargamer with more money than time, they may be bought already painted. Painted lead figures are very expensive, but to the newcomer to the hobby with little knowledge of uniform detail of a period, buying a few odd painted figures to use as a guide on which to model a further 20 or 30 can be money well spent. On the other hand, I've always been aware of the slight colour variations between the figures that I've bought, painted, and those I've painted myself. Perhaps it's just my atrocious painting. Some excellent books have come onto the market at a reasonable price, full of colour prints, and these are listed at the end of the book. The next requisite is a good tape measure. For each person taking part in the game, nothing slows a game down more than when one player has to stand around doing nothing whilst the other moves all his troops, and then the roles have to be reversed, all due to this lack of vital piece of equipment. Unless one is using a squared board as a playing area with light cavalry moving say 4 squares, infantry 2 squares, etc., tape measures are the only way of ensuring that both sides move their various regiments the allowed distances. A few dice will also be needed. These will be required when assessing casualties and the morale of the separate units at different stages in the battle. Very few dice are required for the games described in this book. I have seen the day when I have fought battles in which I've had to throw 30 or 40 dice in what are called saving throws, having already thrown 7 or 8 dice to see if any hits have been scored. What a waste of time, when the result probably boiled down to the mere handful of kills in the end anyway. Obviously, it was the rules that were at fault. Time is everything to a wargamer. Rule number 1 of any game should be, if it wastes time, throw it out. Classic words there from Charlie Wesencraft in Chapter 2 of Practical Wargaming. And now we move on to speak with Mark Freeth. Mark runs the Wargames Holiday Centre. He was on episode 5 of the podcast and has made a couple of random appearances in other places as well. And Charlie was a guest at the Wargames Holiday Centre, and Mark wanted to come on the show and chat about his memories of his time with Charlie. And joining us to continue our tribute to the hobby legend that is Charlie Wesencraft is a good friend of the show, as we always say with people who've been on. They might absolutely hate us, but we always say good friend of the show. So welcome back, Mark Freeth. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, Ken?
Excellent. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. We had a bit of a technical issue before we got to this point, but we're here now.
It only took us 40 minutes. So
Yeah.
There you go. Charlie Wesencraft, he was a great man. That's it. Bye-bye.
That's all the time we've got. Thank you and good night.
Yeah.
But we got there in the end. We persevered. We persevered to make sure that we got some sort of recording to listen to. And if you haven't done already, obviously, Mark was on the show 5. 4 years ago now, and we were talking about the Wargames Holiday Centre that Mark is, I think we agreed, the custodian of. That was the term we went for, wasn't it, Mark?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Agreed.
and
Agreed.
that's back up and running now, which is absolutely wonderful to see after a short break with location issues and stuff. So Mark has kind of put a post out on Facebook just remembering Charlie, and with people who've done that, I've kind of got in contact and said, hey, do you want to come on and just have a chat for a short while about Charlie and your memories of him? So we've got it as a record and audio tribute. So Mark, did you, before we talk about actually meeting Charlie, which you did on a few occasions, did his books have an influence on you at all?
No, I'm completely the Luddite on that, I'm afraid. I simply met Charlie when he reached out to me,
Right.
wanting to come to one of our weekends at the Wargames Holiday Centre. But he wanted to come along to the Don Featherstone ones.
Oh, right. Was that the first one? Was that the first one? Or had
no,
he come to another weekend?
I think it was the second one. So he came. The first one he came to was Gettysburg.
Okay.
And he had that was when I really got to meet the man, and then I was embarrassed to understand that he was an author himself and all that good stuff. But he was pals with Don, so Don Featherstone and Charlie did. They seemed to know each other. Charlie spoke fondly of him.
Yeah.
And everybody bar me was in reverence of Charlie when he came into the room. It was they were almost clamoring to play opposite him, and
wow.
and when the guy who actually played opposite Charlie was a chap called Steve Thompson, he's the chap I spoke to you just earlier on, Ken, about
the rules. Yeah. I met Steve when I came down for the Italian Wars.
Oh, that's true.
He was around.
Yeah, so he's a lovely chap, and he was fighting over Culp's Hill against Charlie. So he was going up Culp's Hill at the fish hook, and Charlie, much of a gentleman as he was, there was no way he was giving up that bloody hill.
Oh, a stubborn gentleman. That's what we like to see.
But it was all done fair and square, So Steve didn't really have a leg to stand on. And while Steve got an absolute tonking as the Reb's going up, poor old Yule just got his arse handed to him that weekend. And at the end of it, Steve was talking to me and he said, you know what? He said, at no point did I get frustrated with it. It was just a complete pleasure playing against the man. So,
absolutely fantastic.
And then we voted him in as most gracious loser. No, what do they call it? You won the prize. What was it? The most sporting player. That's
sporting player. Brilliant. I don't like to talk about prizes that I win. You know these things.
Yeah. No, so Charlie got voted unanimously, and I've never had that. Usually there's 5 of this and 4 other people voting for somebody else, but it was the whole audience voted for Charlie, simply as we got to know him better over the weekend and whatnot. So his name's on the trophy, not the trophy, the memorial vase that was brought about by Don Featherstone's friend Ron Miles. Sadly, Ron's not with us anymore either. So
we seem to be losing that generation, don't we?
We do,
which is really sad, and kind of why I wanted to do this, because I think I don't think anyone else is going to do it. So I think we need to remember these people and have it down somewhere. So did Charlie? Was he a big proponent of American Civil War? Was there a reason why he came to that?
No, he just wanted to come to the Don Featherstone weekend.
Yeah,
I think he seemed to have a general interest. I can't think there was a theme. He was very keen on the World War II that we did later. So he
Yes.
played at Arnhem.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he, even at that stage, I mean, this has got to be, God, I met Charlie probably 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
And that's when we did Gettysburg. And then it was 2 or 3 years after that we did Arnhem. And these were all done at the big double unit that I had. And Arnhem was exceptionally good because I kind of bushwhacked Charlie once I realised, the prestigious air that came around the man.
Who's this bloke?
Yeah, exactly. I just treated him like I treat everybody else. So I think he was quite grateful of that, to be honest. But
Good
when
lad.
we got to doing the Don Featherstones, I always ask a guest speaker to, come along and do a little bit. Rod's done that. You talked about Rod earlier, so he did a little bit on the Italian Wars weekend.
Yeah.
And I asked Charlie, and I remember asking him over the phone. I said, "Look, I do this thing as I've explained, and I really would like it if you would get up and just say a few words." And he said, "Well, how much is a few words? And into what depths do you want me to delve to relay the story?" So I said to him, "Well, it'll only be about 20 minutes. We needed a shepherd's crook. It was about an hour and a half. He was up there talking."
Oh, wow.
And it was absolutely, fantastic because he talked about his days in the forces. He talked about his love of the hobby, the periods that he loves, and obviously referred to all the literature that he'd written. And just throughout the whole experience, you just felt he's a very humble man, quite knowledgeable, as you'd expect. But he wasn't best pleased that I'd asked him to get up and do some public speaking, not without paying him.
He needed a few quid to loosen the tongue.
Oh no, he was good with it, but he did drop a hint that I don't normally do this. He said, "But for you, I'll do it
for free."
Yeah, I'll do it. And when obviously, when you get voted in as the most sporting player, or the most sporting gentleman, I think we call it in the Featherstone Trophy, your name gets entered alongside the year. And what for me was a real tribute to Charlie was there was a chap, and another chap that sadly passed away very suddenly recently, at a younger age like you and I, Ken, Tony Gill. And Tony, he said he didn't care about anything else. All he cared was that he got his name in line with Charlie Wesencraft on the trophy because Tony won it the following year. And that just spoke volumes to me. Yeah, what a lovely man.
Yeah.
A funny story. It's funny. It was. It gives you an idea of what Charlie was like. He navigated all the way down from Durham, where he lived, in the car. And, he's in his 80s at this point. And it didn't have a sat nav, didn't use any of that, just used the map, all good old fashioned stuff, and he got all the way down. And he was very matter of fact about of course I used a map. How else would I have got down it? Because people were remarking, bloody hell, you drove all that way 6 hours in the car. And he was coming off the motorways and going back routes because of the congestion. So he was doing his own sat nav version, but he was using a good old compass and map.
Top man.
Yeah. And then it got to the end of the weekend. I think it was the Gettysburg weekend, and which is the first one. And he went outside, and there was a big, it's an industrial estate, really. And there was a big double industrial unit that I rented. And he went out the front, and other people were hanging around, chatting about what they did and, reminiscing about the weekend and whatnot. And then I had a conversation outside. I thought, what's going on? So we went outside to see what was going on. So there was quite a bit of laughter and, chat.
Yeah.
And there was Charlie with his car, and he was jacking the back of it up outside the unit. So, and we all looked at him, and bless him, he was about 5'8", 5'9", and he was in his 80s, as I said then. and he was just getting on with it. He didn't come in to ask anybody. He's got a flat tire. And then because he had all this stuff in the boot that he took, seemed to take everything that he'd need in case he broke down, water, tools, everything, which is great again. And he was emptying all of this out of the back. And of course, everybody rushed all at once to try. Charlie, we'll do it. Go get up. We'll give you a hand with that. And he was quite adamant. He said, no, it's all right, lads. I can do it. Step back. So everybody stepped back and watched him do it. So I don't know.
Even worse.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was a good thing or not. But then he started jacking the car up, and that's when a few of the burly lads stepped in and said, "Well, come on, at least let us help you." And he said, "Oh, all right." So they jacked it all up, and he poodled off about an hour and a half later than he planned, but made his way home.
That's the army in him, though, isn't it? That's the
definitely
old school, get it done.
Yeah.
Because I think reading, I haven't got it in front of me, but I'm reading kind of a biography of him. He joined up just after the war, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's that just get on and do it generation that I admire greatly, and try and follow in the footsteps of just bloody getting it done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've got quite a few photos of him playing the games, and he really seemed to enjoy the Arnhem game. I think that seemed to be more in keeping with his certainly his knowledge, because he didn't lose that one either.
I think there's a picture on your Facebook, isn't there, of him kind of pointing off into the distance at the Arnhem game, and he looks very much like he's in command. On that
that's when he sat with Ron Miles, who was he's the chap that kicked off the whole Don Featherstone thing, because he was really good friends with Don. He used to go on battlefield tours with them. So he was very keen to spend time with Charlie, and they had a bit of a game, and they were all playing on the same side. So it was all it was a good experience all round. He was doing a lot of writing. I remember that was still going on, because he had some chaps come along from Pen and Sword at the end of the Arnhem weekend, and they had a meeting with him on the premises and were talking about stuff, and I let them get on with it, all in the background of Arnhem Bridge, which they thought was quite fitting.
Yeah.
But so in the times that I met Charlie, as I say, he was very humble, quite knowledgeable, an extremely affable man, and everybody loved him.
Yeah, it sounds like he was a bit of a silent assassin, in that he's laughing and smiling and joking with everyone whilst absolutely slaughtering them on the table.
Well, I think some of these guys were a little in awe of him, a little bit,
Yeah.
I mean, there was lots of banter and lots of good humour, but I think he knew that people had a soft spot for him. He took a little bit of advantage of that, and
bless him. I mean, you don't. I mean, if you meet your heroes in whatever, football or music or whatever it is, you don't want to show them up. So I can imagine that if you're playing.
Trust me, Ken. No, he definitely beat them fair and square. He knew what he was doing, but he did take a little bit of he'd smile at them sweetly and say something in keeping, and just that they'd be killing themselves laughing while he then moved and machine gunned their position to pieces. So
the laughing machine gunnist.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic, mate. So your lasting memories of Charlie then are overwhelmingly positive, then, by the sound of it.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. A true gentleman of the hobby.
Yeah, indeed.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for popping on today.
You're welcome, Ken. I'm sorry about the technical issues at the beginning.
It's no worries at all. And thank you for sharing your memories of a wonderful man.
Yeah, a lovely man.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, Mark.
All right, cheers, Ken. Bye-bye.
These then are the essentials for a war game: 2 armies, a playing surface, a few dice, tape measures, and order pads. Oddly enough, an opponent, though highly desirable, does not fall into the above category. War games are perfectly possible as solo games. Solo games at least have the advantage of never ending in an argument over the interpretation of the rules. Of course, having an opponent does add interest in that one can never know exactly what move the enemy troops will be asked to perform. It's usually a quicker game with 2 players as the orders for both sides, and then their moves and fighting may be carried out in simultaneous stages. Once having found one opponent, it's not necessarily to stop there. Bring in others, let them join in. Wargaming is not confined to 2-man games. Why not play 2 or 3 aside? The action will be just as furious. My final guest on the show is another former guest of mine, Pete Berry, the owner of Bacchus 6mm. And Pete has a wonderful story to tell about when he first began Bacchus 6mm and he'd first gone full-time in the role, and he was contacted by Charlie to help build a display game of Blenheim, and we mentioned this earlier in the interview with Robbie, but we're now going to turn over to Pete and have a chat about his memories of Charlie and him building that diorama for Blenheim. Well, we've just been hearing from Robbie Roddis, and one of the names that was mentioned during our chat about Charlie was Mr. Pete Berry from Bacchus. And joining us on the line from deep, dark South Yorkshire is Pete himself. How are you doing, mate?
I'm fine. Nice to see you again, Ken.
Excellent, and thanks for doing this. When you kind of found out that Charlie had sadly passed away, you'd put a bit of a note on your Facebook page, kind of saying how much he'd been an influence on you, and I thought it would be a great idea to get you on the show just to kind of tell everyone about that experience. So, what was your first sort of knowledge of or awareness of Charlie?
Well, Charlie was one of those names. Charlie Wesencraft was one of those names which was in the Wargames pantheon.
Yeah.
When I was first starting, obviously there's Featherstone and Charles Grant, but he always seemed a little low profile. But I got his books. The Practical Wargaming book, which is actually a really good old book. I've reread that since sadly Charlie moved on, and it's a gem.
It is.
It really is. But more particularly when I decided a long time ago that I wanted to write a set of English war rules for myself. And this is what eventually became Forlorn Hope. And I think you're passingly familiar with those.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I've even updated them myself, mate. They're currently in use. Currently in use.
Yeah. But basically what I did was I'm a great believer that you always stand on the shoulders of other people who've done all the spade work if you're writing a set of rules. So I got together what other people had done and just read.
Yeah.
I took very little from most people. And to be honest, Charlie's book, which is... I'm brandishing my own copy of...
On an audio podcast. Well done, Pete.
Yeah, well, so you can see it, Ken. So you can read the title out.
I know, and you've got like every bugger else who's been on this show a signed copy.
I have, yes, and I can prove it again just to you.
With Pike and Shot is the book that Pete's got.
There we go. My signed copy, attested to by by the Yorkshire Gamer himself.
It is. Yeah. That is provenance.
Yeah. But a measure of the man. When I asked him to do this, he didn't have a clue why I should actually bother. Incredibly modest guy, just lovely man. He was a friend. But that's my first sort of association with him. I said I took very little from the rules themselves in terms of the mechanics. but you take ideas, inspiration, the way he wrote about the period, the way he put the games together. But there's one bit, and I'm going to be really boring and give a quote from his
No,
book.
that's
It's
absolutely
very
fine,
short.
mate. Absolutely fine.
And the secret of rule writing lies in the ability to be able to take a detail of movement, fire effect, etc., study it, stretch it to its ultimate in an effort to cover all possibilities, and then to simplify it until a
Oh,
playable rule emerges. And so often, this simplification is ignored. And that is an absolute golden piece of advice for anybody writing rules. Um, and that stuck with me all this time, and I've
yeah.
tried to keep that.
Yeah, it's important to point out to people who maybe don't know Charlie that well or the times that well that we'd kind of started with relatively straightforward rules that then became unbelievably complicated, even for me who enjoys a little bit of complication in the rules. But we were having like Avalon Hill and SPI and all things like that, and it was look up section 10.9.8.1 and
Empire 3 Napoleonic rules.
yeah, that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
it was certainly a breath of fresh air at that time, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And this idea of just being able to take complications and then boil it to an outcome.
Yeah,
And that has been a massive trend in wargaming, certainly historical wargaming over the past few years. And he was the only one of the originals to me who took that approach, who went away from the mechanistic
yeah,
of this versus that to get an end result. And it was a very logical process driven from the bottom up. That was a different approach and way ahead of its time. This is manifested in his practical wargaming book by a set of rules, which is years in advance, which basically took a base as a battalion,
yes,
which is a concept which is now reasonably familiar to most people. Certainly, it's one I've used for many years. But he was the first person to come up with that. And this is in the days of individual casualty removal, individual figures. So again, a lot of forethought there.
yeah. A lot of that early book is talking about, and I think he even has a chapter talking about single figure games,
Yeah,
and then goes on to discuss basing, multi basing, and all the things that we're extremely familiar with today. That at that time it was like, oh, this is a bit groundbreaking, and also the overarching rules that then become changed for each individual period. So, I
yeah,
mean, similar to your own polymorph system, I would suggest in that way that you have a core set of rules and then add-ons and changes for each individual historical period.
yeah. And again, these, I thought, oh, this is a new way of doing it. No, this is something which had been thought about, talked about, and if not developed to that extent,
Mm.
it was there. Like again, there's nothing new in wargaming rules. There really isn't.
No, there isn't. You see, oh, I've got this real cool new mechanism, and oh,
Yeah.
oh, you're back.
Right. Sorry, you were never away.
Oh, was I not? Oh, right, you just
No.
disappeared for a second, but I'll edit this bit out.
Yeah.
I
Now,
can't
where were you?
I can't remember now. What was I talking about? Charlie wasn't craft. Oh dear me. So you took inspiration from Charlie in that book, and like you say, that his style of writing was very friendly, very approachable. I've done exactly the same as you. I've gone back over these last couple of weeks and read Practical Wargaming again, and quite enjoyed some bits of it. Talking about it when he was talking about getting married and having to have children so he could have somebody to wargame with. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. You won't know because you won't have heard that part of the interview yet. But apparently, at 97, just before he died, he'd taken delivery of Hail Caesar rules and was trying to work out how to play them. uh, which I think is a brilliant story. And I hope I'm still getting new sets of rules at 97 for certain. So you then move on when you're just starting back us up. to actually receive a phone call that from your kind of Facebook page. It came as a bit of a surprise.
It wasn't a phone call.
What?
It was a letter.
A letter?
As it happens, yeah, I have the letter here.
Oh, fantastic.
And this is Charlie's first direct contact with me.
Yeah.
Dear Sir, I have been asked by the Duke of Marlborough, talking about name dropping, to produce a model of the Battle of Blenheim, which will be on permanent display at Blenheim. Having read your advertisement in Miniature Wargames, I am anxious to see your figures. Please send me by return your catalogue if you can. Please phone me or leave me your phone number. Also, I have an appointment at Blenheim on Monday morning. If you could send the odd samples to, and there's address somewhere at Blenheim, which I duly did. And that was basically the start of our relationship.
Oh, well,
of our friendship, really.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
I have a file of all the correspondence I had with him over this project. And it turned out to be a massive model of Blenheim, the Battle of Blenheim, using our figures. Now, the Spanish succession's always been a favourite period of mine. Always. So to have that arrive out of the blue. First of all, Charlie's a wargaming name, personality. And second of all, a project of that prestige, it was absolutely amazing. And we followed through on that. And he realised then that I was, again, passionately interested in the period. So we had a lot of correspondence, a lot of chat about it. We finally got to meet up, which was lovely. And friendship basically grew out of that project. I mean, the final model was amazing.
Yeah. So whereabouts were you in the Bacchus history? You've been on the podcast and we've spoken about the development of the company. But where were you in that journey at Bacchus when this letter arrived?
Well, this letter is dated the 16th of September 2003.
Yeah.
So I'd been full time maybe for a year.
Right.
So this was right at the beginning, and basically we were scrapping to get a name now. Just to try and just raise a head above the parapet, and this was momentous. We were able to just parade this around and trail it around the internet as it was then, and just help raise our profile and credibility.
Yeah,
I mean, it's an incredibly prestigious project.
Yeah, and did you have the figures available at that time? Had you got a range that was suitable for Blenheim?
Of course, Spanish succession.
Of course.
Of course, yeah. It was the first range I actually sculpted.
Oh, brilliant!
So it was there. This is why Charlie went for it, because it was a complete range. So it's all there, and the final icing on the cake, final cherry on the icing, was for Marlborough himself, because he was obviously the model. I did a single one-off sculpt.
Oh.
It wasn't cast.
Yeah.
It's an actual, milliput over wire armature original sculpt of Marlborough, which I painted myself.
Absolutely.
And that's in the model. So if anybody sees the model and they see the man, that's a one-off.
Oh, fantastic. So just tell us the story then about putting together the display and what you needed to do, etc., to get it at the table and help Charlie.
Well, my job was a fairly simple one. The fact that Charlie would say, "I need an awful lot of French infantry," and I would say, "Here you are, Charlie."
Yeah,
I've been in the casting machine a few times, but we had a bit of discussion backwards and forwards about what he was going to do, because he needed to pick a snapshot in time of the battle, one which would show most development happening, most manoeuvre, and most of the armies. So there was a bit of toing and froing. We decided on that. When I say we decided, he decided.
Exactly.
It was his model, and it was very good. At the time, I had a section on my website which is called projects, and people could send work in progress of a project. It's episodic, so there'd be section 1, section 2, section 3. It was a great little area. And he very kindly provided some photographs and a little write-up of the project, and it all been put together. Now, I still have that somewhere, so what I may do on my next website update is put a link to it. It still exists out in the ether. It's not part of my current website.
Yeah.
You should still be able to access it.
Oh,
and people will be able to read all about it. And there's pictures the model itself and the work in progress. Actually, that so it's quite a nice little piece. So yeah, thanks for reminding me that, Ken. I'll get that done.
Yeah, no, I think I've got a screenshot of it. So I'll include it in the YouTube version of this. So did you get to go down and have a look at the project as it was going on, or when it had finished, or?
My only well, I got an invite down to Blenheim for the official release
Oh,
because it
nice.
was for the whatever it is centenary.
Yeah.
And yeah, I dropped down there, turned up, and blazing hot day. So there, I'm in my suit, my tie,
Oh, nice.
and yeah, and Charlie was there, and his Grace, the Duke of Marlborough, and David Chandler,
Oh, nice.
who I'd never met before, but I mean, a guy I'd always wanted to meet. I mean, you know, his work on the period is his book, The Art of Warfare and the Age of Marlborough, is one of my primers into the period, and so yeah, that was quite an occasion for me. I really, really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And yeah, the model itself was amazing. Fortunately, it was covered in glass. So every time I tried to take a picture of it, all I got was glare. That was epic failure in terms of trying to get a really good picky of the thing.
Oh, that was absolutely brilliant.
I don't know where the model is now.
Right.
I mean, it was promised it would be on permanent display, and I think what was said to Charlie was, whenever there is a brick standing in Blenheim Palace, there will be a place in the model for it, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I haven't been out to Blenheim for a long time. I must go again.
Yes, I haven't been since probably a child, so it's one for me. So if anyone out there does know if the model is still on display at Blenheim, let us know, and that would be great. And maybe I'll bob down and check it out and see what state it's in after all these years, because it's going to be
It's hard to miss it. It's huge. It's absolutely enormous.
Oh well, that'll be perfect for the show. I might do a Blenheim Palace special
Yeah.
on this show. That would be absolutely brilliant. Did you keep in contact with Charlie then after the?
Yeah. We became friends,
Mm.
and we got a bit of a chance to chat at the shows we went to, and you know, just as you do, just keep in touch with somebody like that. And it's just amazing, man. He was just so easy to get on with. You know, it could have just been a professional working relationship, as you can tell from that first letter there, very formal. But he very, very quickly slipped into something which is far deeper, far more cooperative. And that's it. It was impossible not to like the guy. He was just lovely and so unassuming.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of our hobby, he achieved an awful lot of things. He was a brilliant model maker, but there was no. There was no self promotion. There was no aggrandizement with that. He was just an ordinary guy who just happened to employ soldiers. You know, that's just how it is.
And I've spoken to a few people now about Charlie, and this is one thing that has come up regularly is this unassuming personality. And there's some lovely stories at the Wargames Holiday Centre where he turns up and everyone's just like mouth on the floor, pointed. Charlie Wesencraft, and he's going, what?
Yes, exactly. I mean, he's come to me once. Was it Pen and Sword who just reprinted Practical Wargaming?
Yeah.
I don't know. Somebody just done that, and he sort of bumped into me and said, you know, I've just been rediscovered.
Oh dear me! Yeah, he was an absolutely amazing chap to everyone that's met him.
My only regret was I never got a chance to play a game with him.
Oh, that was my next question. And Pete, I think you've escaped, because everyone that I have spoken to has said that he was a silent assassin, that he maintained his lovely, gentle personality whilst clearing the table of your figures.
Oh, it's always a way. Yeah, it's a quiet one you've got to be wary of.
Yeah, it certainly is, mate. Well, thank you so much for popping on and talking about Charlie. It certainly seems like you've got some really fond memories of him. And kind of, how would you like to sum up your thoughts and feelings about Charlie?
I think we've just lost one of the greatest stars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perhaps he wouldn't consider us one of the brightest, but an original thinker, all wrapped up in a very, very modest package.
Yeah,
But yeah, we need people like that.
I can't really add much more to that, Pete. That's a lovely testimony to the man. Thank you very much for joining us today, Pete. Much appreciated.
Okay, you're most welcome, Ken. Always a pleasure.
Chapter 14, How to Use This Book. In the few pages of this book, an attempt has been made to present the would-be wargamer with all the basic facts required by him to enable him to fight a wargame within a given period, under rules designed to take into account the variation of weapons and tactics as they applied during the chosen time. Having read the book through, the reader will realise that it is only possible to fight in one historical period at a time, and that his first task is going to be to collect 2 opposing armies. Each period contains the details of its regimental organisations, and it's left to the reader to decide upon the scale of his battle, whether to fight in army, corps, divisional or brigade strength. Do not be too ambitious at first. Exciting games can run from skirmishes between very few units, whilst those fought with large numbers of units often bogged down owing to their very size. Whilst it may tickle your ego if you are the commander-in-chief, it may test your skill more if you are a mere brigadier. And those are the final words in Charlie's practical wargaming book, and I hope you enjoy this tribute and the contributions that have been made from Robbie Roddis, Mark Freeth and Pete Berry, and I want to thank those guys very much for coming on and spending a bit of time chatting with me and sharing their memories of Charlie, and I hope you've enjoyed it. My next episode will be out in 3 weeks' time. I've kind of kept all the housekeeping at the end so we can talk about Charlie, and it's his episode. And then if you want to turn this bit off, you can do. So my next episode will be in 3 weeks' time. I am planning to do a 3-week release schedule now, just get a bit of sanity back into things. I've been releasing quite quickly, like 10 days, 2 weeks at sometimes, and did a little bit of podcast burnout. So I've planned everything now up until Christmas. So all my guests are planned in. So I need to not think of any more shows. And my next guest is planned to be released on the 29th of August. And that will be with Mark Strachan. And Mark is a wargamer from New Zealand. New Zealand is a place that we haven't been before on our travels around the wargaming world. And he runs a blog called 1866 and all that, and it's one of the blogs that I've been following for a long time, so I'm really looking forward to getting up at the crack of dawn so that I can speak with Mark, but it will be a great show and I'm looking forward to speaking to him. Thanks again for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Give us a like and a follow and a comment wherever you see this. It helps to improve the visibility of the podcast on the various search engines. And the more people we can get listening, the better it is, because, this old school, big style wargaming, this is the only outlet for it. So let's keep it big. Until next time, see you.